Tucker Carlson recently launched his new documentary, Patriot Purge, where he attempts to basically rewrite recent history here in the United States, specifically the events of January 6th. And of course, he's thrown in a lot of fear mongering, saying that liberals are now trying to lock up, round up, and toss in Guantanamo Bay their conservative adversaries. Joining me to talk about this, as well as some other issues that are going on this week, author David Neiwert. David, thank you for coming back on Ring of Fire with me. It's been a very long time since you and I have spoken, but it's great to have you back here.
Thanks, Farron. Always good to be here.
So let's dive right into this Tucker Carlson documentary. It's, I believe it's a 3-part series that they've been slowly releasing out there, and it's the word disgusting doesn't even do it justice, I think, with what Tucker's doing. So lay this out for us.
Well, of course, I use the word documentary with air quotes in this case because there's nothing factual about it. There are no actual journalists involved in compiling this documentary. It was produced and co-written along with Tucker by, one of his staff members who actually is a guy connected to white nationalists. And in fact, and of course, the main source of his story, which is, his argument is that the FBI actually secretly made the January 6th insurrection a false flag operation with the intent of the persecuting Trump voters. Is a guy who also is a white nationalist, a guy named Darren Beattie. And, he's actually tried to lay out the case in print. And it's a joke because Beattie can't even doesn't even understand how there's a difference between an unindicted co-conspirator and a cooperating defendant. And he mixes them up constantly in his things, and arguing that the FBI is actually was using these informants to sort of coordinate the whole thing, mainly because several of the Oath Keepers and Proud Boys, in fact, were FBI informants, but they weren't FBI informants to inform on their own organizations. They were providing the FBI with information about Antifa and Black Lives Matter. That was their role as FBI informants. They weren't informing on the FBI, on the Proud Boys and Oath Keepers. So this is really it's just a piece of garbage that white nationalists have put together, and is now being regurgitated by Tucker Carlson and Glenn Greenwald and this whole faction that is trying to basically gaslight us about the events of January 6th. They're trying to tell us that what we all saw on January 6th didn't really happen. It was something else altogether, right? And, we all saw it.
Right.
And,
well, I just wanted to jump in and say that because we did all see this. I'm not a guy that watches, network news, cable news, anything like that. Usually I read to get my news. But that day I was glued to the screen. I was watching it. I think it was CNN, kind of flipping back between them and NBC News, and just, calling my mom calling me every 5 minutes, back and forth, like, oh my God, are you watching the? Because everybody was watching it. We all knew what was happening. We saw who these people were. There was no question that this was a legitimate, a failed coup attempt, but you got to call it what it is. This was a soft coup, a real coup, a failed coup. However you slice it, these people wanted to overthrow what the government was doing at the time and hinder Congress in the process. And now Tucker's out here saying, nope, let me give you the real story. And it's pure trash.
Well, and of course, that's the upshot of it is that, the bad people aren't they're not the ones who invaded the Capitol and attempted to prevent the peaceful transfer of power that has been the hallmark of American democracy for its entire existence. No, the bad people are the ones who who are trying to hold them account for it. And that's, that's kind of the part of this pseudo documentary line. He's got people saying they're hunting us down, they're hunting conservatives down, and that sort of thing. And it's important to understand that one of the things that this sort of rhetoric does is it actually creates permission in the minds of the receptive listeners to engage in their own acts of violence, because it tells them that the other side is so evil and so nefarious, and that they're going to use violence against you, so you might as well use it first, right? This is part of the logic, and this is how this sort of dynamic works. It's called scripted violence, and ultimately Tucker is scripting the violence for, or at least scripting future violence for us. And we've got this powerful trend on the right, particularly online, and particularly when you go into some of the darker corners where the radical right is organizing, but also a lot of these militias and folks like this, in the eagerness among all these people to declare civil war on the rest of us is just astonishing and overpowering. I mean, a couple of weeks ago at a Charlie Kirk event in Idaho, we had a guy stand up and ask Charlie, when do we get to start using the guns? How many more elections do they steal before we start killing these people? And that, and it raised a few eyebrows and made a few people point fingers, but there was only very brief attention paid to that. But the reality is that guy's sentiments are actually incredibly common on the radical right, particularly online right now, because I spend a lot of time in these forums and stuff like that, in places where they go, and I monitor what they say, and I listen to what they're talking about. And all they've been talking about really for the last 3, 4, 5 months is civil war. And, when can we start shooting the liberals? When can we start using the guns? And that, of course, is, what they're all looking to the Kyle Rittenhouse trial in Wisconsin for, is, they're hoping and waiting for an acquittal, because if there is one, and I expect there will be, it's going to be a big green light for them to actually go ahead, because it's going to tell them that they can do this without consequence.
Right. Give them the permission, saying, listen, as long as you say it was self-defense, go out there, do whatever you want, cross the state lines, get your hands on a weapon that you shouldn't even legally be able to have. I mean,
travel across state lines.
Yeah.
Be a minor in possession of an AR-15.
Protect property that's not even your. I mean, look, the whole thing. I mean, it's absolutely ridiculous that it is, headed in that direction. But because this should have been a cut and dry case, like, you killed these people, you're going to jail. But of course, we can argue about that all day long, because we all know that what the judge did, the way the judge essentially made the prosecutors, have to try this case with 2 hands tied behind their back. And that started at the very beginning of the trial, when he said, you can't call these people victims, even though by definition they were victims. They were killed by this man or kid.
Yeah.
And
well, it even started before the trial, when he really limited the kind of video evidence that they could produce. They weren't allowed to actually talk about the ideology of the militia that he went and joined. And this actually should have been central to the case, because these militias are extreme radicals they call themselves boogaloos. They're eager for a civil war. They can't wait to start shooting liberals. And it has a lot to do with preconditioning Rittenhouse's mind to be ready to pull that trigger at the drop of a hat, which is what he did. And that's really, I think, important. But the judge said, we don't want this to be a political trial. We also didn't get to learn about, the background of one of his witnesses, who got up there and explained that Kyle was certainly justified in what he was doing. This same witness actually happened to be a January 6th insurrectionist who was there and was telling the crowd on January 6th that we need to start a civil war. None of that was allowed to be introduced into the courtroom. And I think this is really unfortunate because these are really central to understanding the dynamics of what happened that day.
Well, and you have to have all of the context, to be able to paint the picture of who this individual is. The photograph of him in the bar, which, again, right. He's 17 years old. He shouldn't even be in a bar, but throwing up the white power sign.
With a bunch of Proud Boys.
Exactly. That... And smiling, acting like, no, I didn't just murder two people in the street for everyone to see. And that is central to this case. And again, it all does kind of tie back a lot to this echo chamber that has been created on the right. And now it's not just Tucker Carlson out there pushing these white nationalist narratives, but you also do have all of these groups coming out there, the Boogaloos, the Proud Boys. And it all just feeds itself. It's become a monster, and they're all feeding off one another and growing larger to the point where we have a majority of Republicans say that violence might be necessary to, as they put it, quote, save America. Save us from what? We need saving from you is what we need right now.
Right. Well, they talk about saving America. I mean, this is part of the whole dynamic of calling themselves patriots. They really see themselves as the patriot movement. But you need to understand that the patriot movement has been historically and always will be fundamentally anti-democratic. The first thing you ever do, if you talk to these folks about how, well, this was an attack on democracy, they will tell you, well, this is a republic, not a democracy, right? Which tells you right away that, I mean, of course, that's utterly false and just a joke of, something that's actually just historically wrong. But it is something that they believe. It's something that was actually concocted by the John Birch Society back in the 1960s. And it has remained a steady part of this far-right patriot movement since its beginnings. And fundamentally, they believe that what they want is an autocratic republic run by Donald Trump. And that was obviously what they were trying to install on January 6th. And they are the enemies of democracy. And if you try to talk to them about this, they will just say, well, we're saving the republic. It's not a democracy.
Another thing also happened this week too, that, kind of a flash in the pan thing. Nobody paid too much attention to it, but I did a segment on this, and this was the fact that Tucker Carlson comes out this week and he tries to start saying, you know what? I don't think Vice President Kamala Harris was actually is American. And he said that he thinks this, because she went to high school in Montreal. And to me, what this is this is just a birther redux at this point. It's the remix. And it's because, okay, here's this elected official. They're a Democrat and they don't look like you. And because they don't look like you, clearly they cannot be from here. And this is just another extension of that racism that we see coming from Carlson constantly. Yes. And it plays well with his audience. They love it. And they don't realize, or maybe they do, and they don't care what he's really feeding them.
Yeah. That's actually a regurgitated argument from the Claremont Institute. A guy from the Claremont Institute wrote an essay making that argument during the campaign in 2020. And clearly Carlson is just pulling that same argument up again. Claremont Institute, incidentally, is the right-wing think tank that has gone total Trump. They also argue that the January 6th insurrection was a hoax, and that calling it an insurrection is a hoax. And yeah, they're very, they've praised Carlson and that sort of thing. They ran an essay back in February or March, in which a guy basically argued that the right needs to, he didn't call it fascist, but the sort of ethos that he embraced was fundamentally a fascist one, in which they embrace the use of violence against these demonic left. So,
And we're seeing more and more these days from Republicans jumping on the racial issue.
Yeah.
With the critical race theory, also the attacks on the LGBTQ community, with them calling the books that deal with this, oh, it's pornographic. That happened. I don't know if it was in Virginia, but it was one of the kind of southern, eastern seaboard states. And then, of course, we had it in Texas where they say we're going to get rid of the pornographic books. But no, it's not pornographic. It's dealing with different lifestyles. And most of it is stories of abuse. And so it's whatever they can get, always trying to find, the others, the people that are different from you.
It's all culture war stuff. That's what the Republican Party's been running on for the last 10 years is culture war stuff. And, you notice it kind of that CRT suddenly disappeared from the airwaves after the Virginia election.
Yeah.
There was some very interesting polling, though, around all this that pointed out that somebody actually tried to poll Republicans about, well, what do you know about CRT? You say you're opposed to CRT. What do you know? And most people don't actually know what the hell CRT, what critical race theory is. And what the polling found out was that, no, really what 70% of Republicans are opposed to is not necessarily CRT. It's the teaching of the history of racism in America to their children. They don't want their children to be taught about the history of racism in America, period. And, that's the point at which you just kind of say, no, our children need to know. Children need to know.
Well, and they do. And a big reason they need to know and understand this is so we don't end up with a bunch of, more Proud Boys. People need to understand what has happened in this country, understand what is happening in this country, and not, to brainwash them, but to open their eyes. This isn't about creating closed-minded children who only believe that. No, this is about saying, listen, there's other life experiences out there. There's other kinds of people. You need to understand this, and you need to understand that, yes, you may not go through the same struggles as these people. And yes, they go through certain struggles because of the color of their skin or because of their sexual orientation. And that's all we want people to understand. Like, listen, some people have it tougher than you, and sometimes the system makes it so. I mean, we're actively still passing laws in this country today to marginalize certain groups of people, based on sexual orientation, based on gender. So it's crazy for people to think that this isn't a crucial issue, but at the same time, it also wasn't being taught anywhere. So they made the issue out of nothing. This is a college level, theory, and they think we're teaching it to first graders. It's crazy.
Right. Yes. Well, the legend of the child who comes home weeping that she's been told she's an oppressor.
Yeah.
Is a very powerful one. And honestly, that kind of gets at the nub of what I think Republicans, or I should say really right-wing and white nationalist ideologues are exploiting, is that out there among most folks, particularly people who don't think about racism a lot, don't think about, they just kind of lead their daily lives. I think there's a real general discomfort with the idea that they who don't consciously harbor any racial animus in their thoughts or in their dealings with other people, that there's a lot of discomfort that they have some culpability and blame for what happened 100 years ago, right? But that's, and I actually get that. I mean, having confronted it myself, it's a very discomforting thing to go through because, I had a great grandfather who stole land from the Indians. So, it's like, okay, how do you deal with that? But the reality is that, actually, the funny thing about that is that critical race theory, if you actually understand it, actually tells them that, no, you're not to blame. It tells them what critical race theory basically says is that that racism and white supremacy is so deeply embedded in our laws and our codes and in the sort of infrastructure that we've built up, that we built up during times when white supremacism was the rule of law. Because a lot of those structures still exist, we're still enforcing white supremacist ideals and sort of standards unconsciously, and that people with perfectly good will are still enabling it because they're not recognizing the roots of what these, sort of this infrastructure is, this white supremacist infrastructure. It's not visible in the way that it used to be. And so, and I think that actually makes a tremendous amount of sense. And it also relieves people, I think, of the personal responsibility for it, but it also does require the responsibility to fix it.
Yeah.
Which is the way I always approached it. Well, I can't do anything about my great-grandfather stealing Indians' lands, but I can do what I can do now to make things right here and now, here today. And work towards that. And make a conscious effort.
Yeah, and we're dealing, though, with a Republican Party that just wants to pretend and convince people that none of this ever happened. And if it did happen in some instances, well, of course it was okay because it created the America we know and love today. And that is a big part of, Tucker Carlson's talking points, of the talking points from some of these other, wackos they have out there right now, your Marjorie Taylor Greenes and your people like that.
Right.
And because it's not just, again, saying it didn't happen, but also saying, well, it did, and it was good because that's why we're here today. And I don't even know how you counter that. I don't know how you correct that in these people that really are the true believers. I know we got to try, but it's just, it is such a Herculean task.
Well, the idea that massive lynching of African Americans was in any way good. The history of lynching and race riots, which is actually ethnic cleansing events in America, is profound. 100 years ago in 1919, we had the Red Summer that saw some 47 so-called race riots break out across the country that actually were mass ethnic cleansing events, driving Black people out of white neighborhoods, out of rural areas where they had taken up farming, and all of the other things. And this, it entailed, people burning their homes down, people lynching people, people being killed in large numbers. And we've just erased that from our memory. We've erased that summer from our memory. But it actually was sort of a foundational thing in terms of creating the America that we have today. And the America that we have today is inequitable and unjust. So if you're saying that it's a good thing that we did that in 1919, it created a system where Black people are relegated to poorer neighborhoods and have no ability to network their way up into better economic conditions. If you think that's a good thing, I'm here to tell you you're wrong.
Absolutely. And so real quick here, just a couple minutes, I do want to take the time to talk about what we are seeing, just kind of circle back here with this rewrite of January 6th, because, we just hit on the rewrite of American history, dismissing it, excusing it, and it does all come full circle because this is what's happening with January 6th. Even though, as we already said, we all watched it happen, and we know because the investigators have gone through years of social media posts from these people. This was not a false flag event. We would have had to have started planning it 6 years ago and planting these social media posts.
And it wasn't Antifa.
Exactly. And so, but again, with, I forget his name, Republican lawmaker, I guess, Georgia, maybe South Carolina, but who said, it was mostly like people on a tour coming through the White House. Marjorie Taylor Greene and Jim Jordan and Matt Gaetz trying to bust into the prison to expose the horrendous conditions that these patriots are suffering under. it's been 10 months since this happened. That's it, okay? 10 and a half months since January 6th, and we've already hit the point where they're doing a good job, unfortunately, of convincing people that it wasn't as bad as what we all saw that day.
That's correct. Well, they're doing a lot. They're able to do that for a couple of reasons. One, in right-wing media, there's been very little post-January 6th coverage of the event itself. So most people who watch Fox News, for instance, have never seen most of the evidence in this. They've never seen, I'm sure they've never watched that 42-minute New York Times video that compiled all the events that if you watch it, it's just devastating. It just tells you exactly what happened, and it makes it just unmistakably clear that this was an extremely violent, heavily armed mob that was attempting to not only lynch members of Congress, but to prevent the functioning of American democracy. And yet, yeah, they simply, they don't want to own up to that, and I can't say that blame them because it's pretty freaking awful. I think, of course, their alternative is to go hide their heads in shame. So, of course, they're just fighting with everything they got, and what is on their side, what's enabled them to get away with it is that we've had 4 years of authoritarian conditioning by the Trump administration, by Donald Trump in particular, of this whole audience. We've got 63 million people out there that, well, what is it? 70%, 73% of them believe the election was stolen.
Yeah. It's hard to fight against that kind of misinformation, but hey, that's our job. We're doing it. You're doing a phenomenal job of it, by the way, with the Daily Kos. You do it with your books. So real quick, tell everybody where they can find you, where they can follow you.
Well, the easiest place to follow me, of course, is on Twitter under my name, David Neiwert, at David Neiwert. And you can also, I write a daily post for Daily Kos. And I have I'm very proud to be working there because I have several great colleagues that I'm very glad that my work's appearing alongside them. And Kos is one of the only organizations that has consistently supported my work over the years. So I'm very happy to be there with them. And I think that, you should read not just my stuff, but everyone else is there. But Twitter and Daily Kos are the best places to find me.
Well, fantastic. David Neiwert, thank you very much for talking with us today.
Very much a pleasure, Farron.